Joko Conversations is forward again. We are so happy to be with you. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you might be watching this. Welcome to the Joko. I'm Brother Youssef, a poet, a professor, a brother in the community trying to make a contribution. And I am joined by my wonderful partner and comrade, Tasha. Hi, Tasha. You're muted.
I thought I unmuted. I thought I did the right thing. I'm unmuted now, though, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, greetings, everybody. Yes, we are so glad to be here, be back in these times of change and transformation and assertion of, this assertion of values and values and so much energy circulating and so much learning going on and so many righteous energies just lifting up, people finding their feet, right? All of us finding our new muscles, right? New muscles of for this ongoing resistance. And we always like to start to open the way to our conversation. First, looking toward all of those parenting forces in our lives, our people, our life experiences, our educators, all of those forces that have shaped us as individuals who come to be a part of working toward making this world just, right? Toward, right, in this huge conglomerate thing that human life has become, to return ourselves to the values of the small band, I'll say, to the values of simple ethics, of simple human to human connection and the things that make that work. We always acknowledge that we are members of the African human family and uplift all of our heroes and sheroes and contributors, champions for the cause of justice and inclusion and equal distribution and appropriate distribution, and to bring out the best that human beingness has to offer. We uplift those members of the African family that have world family that have contributed to that work. And we always know that any work that we do at the hospitality of the original peoples of this Turtle Island. We do so at the hospitality of the original peoples of this Los Angeles basin and this Southern California, and at the hospitality and grace of their descendants who continue to uphold and hold forth their cultural truths, right? And the truths of their existence and the vitality and viability of their human cultural solutions for living with the planet. And with that, we, go forward to have our discussion tonight and to joyfully be a part of making this new world, or let's say reinvigorating, ancient values into this thing that has become human life. So, yay! That's
yes, those life-affirming values, right? Life-centered values and life across, species, right? as our First Nations family say, right? All our relations.
Yes.
And land back worldwide, we always say, right? On yes, and land back worldwide. The planet needs it, right? Let alone the people, right? The planet to
For
get back
real.
to those traditions of stewardship, right? And um, those traditional relationships, those life affirming and rejuvenating relationships with the land that traditional peoples everywhere, right? Us, we still retain that knowledge, um, although that too is shrinking in a lot of places, right? The So yes, on our topic tonight, though, right? We're really picking up where we left off last time, a couple of weeks back, and we missed a week because we spent last Thursday at a wonderful bookstore in Long Beach, Page Against the Machine. If you're in Long Beach, California, check it out on 4th Street, East
Love
4th
it every
Street.
time I hear it.
Yeah, and a wonderful poetry series that they have there. What's the name of the series, Tasha?
Uh, Trenches of Poets.
Trenches
Trenches
of
full
Poets,
of
right?
poets.
And
Trenches. Yeah.
folks, embrace the imagery there, right? Trenches of Poets. The Where Tasha was invited to be a featured reader, along with an open mic, and it was a wonderful evening. Of, yeah, it was a wonderful evening. There was an incident in the middle of it, but that's not for tonight to talk about. But the reading and folks sharing, it was wonderful.
Incredible.
Page Against the Machine, and the poetry series Trenches of Poets. So that's where we were last Thursday. It was wonderful. Um,
And I said it wrong. Let me correct. Trenches full of poets. Trenches
Trenches
full
full
of
of
poets.
poets. Okay,
Yes.
there we go. Yeah, Trenches full of poets at
For
Page Against
accuracy.
the Machine.
Machine.
Um,
I'll get that.
so we're back tonight, right? We're back tonight to pick up where we left off on this moment, right? This reinvigorated moment that has been building for a very long time of open and assertive anti-blackness. Um, no more of the microaggressions and and whatnot. Like you say, full chested, right? Anti-blackness on parade, part two,
Mm-hmm,
and all
mm-hmm.
the various ways in which it is manifesting right now, right? And um, part of what we talked about the last time we were on the conversation was the stereotype of the SNAP recipient and the number of people. This again during the government shutdown before the opposition party went back to its usual form of not being an opposition party. And there was all this um, talk of black people complaining about not getting their uh, food stamps, right, or their food assistance, and always, and as always, couched in the terminology of the undeserving somehow, right, and people who don't want to work, despite everything. Well, I was going to say, despite everything we actually know about SNAP recipients, but I guess that's the thing, right? People don't know. Um, yeah,
Mm-hmm,
most SNAP
mm-mm.
recipients are white, period, right? And most SNAP recipients also work, that part too, that people are working. But people are not being paid enough to pay for all
Eat.
all their living needs. So anyway,
Absolutely.
and that wasn't all we talked about, but that was, one of the ways we talked about this this reemergence, right? And the assertiveness of this anti-Black discourse in so many particular ways. I wanted to get back to that along with some other ways, right? So I wanted to ask you a question.
Mhm.
Because another comment I made the last time we talked about this, at least that I'm interpreting the rise in anti-Indian, right? The anti-South Asian racism, I'm reading that really as a form of anti-Blackness, right? That y'all
Mhm.
too dark, right? Period, right? Whatever Aryan
Mhm.
mythology of conquest and whatever notions and whatever traditions of colorism coming out of South India or coming out of the colonial experience in South India. Um, y'all, they fall into the Black category in the white supremacist imagination.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
all that in mind, I wanted to ask you a question, right?
Mhm.
Because you and I both um, are associated with, work for, volunteer for the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, right? BAJI. The that is offering various forms of support, infrastructure for Black migrants. Where whatever country they're coming from, whatever their status might be. Um, and I know among other organizations, BAJI, right, dealing directly with immigrant communities, is on the front line, right, of the ethnic cleansing that's going on, right, and through these deportations. So, is it not the case that those folks who have been deported under this current regime, the regime that started on January 20th, Trump 2.0, are migrants of African um, descent? Is that still correct as far as you know?
Um, I because you told me what you were going to ask. I know what you asked, but I actually didn't hear the question in what you said. But I believe what you're asking is the rate of deportation, comparative rates
Mm-hmm.
of deportation. Of yes, and yeah, and this is one of the things I have learned while working in my adjunct, position at Baji. And the way we certainly take it for granted in the Black community. Oh, diaspora wars notwithstanding, oh, this brother's from Jamaica, this brother's from Nigeria, this brother's from, and the portion of the Black population in the US is like a quarter of the Black population of the US is Black immigrant. Every fourth person of African
Mm-hmm.
descent has
Mm-hmm.
come is Black immigrant, right? Rather than this multi-generational, right, African immigrant that we represent. And we, as Black people, and Black immigrants as Black people, are criminalized, right? All of the ways of criminalizing immigrants are overrepresented in, you know, as used against Black immigrants, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the rates and the ways in which that criminalization leads to deportation is also significantly, well outpaces the way other groups are deported. And of course, the only in the public imagination that serves for,
Mm-hmm.
immigrants are brown, right? Whatever that are
Right.
brown.
In the public
And
imagination, that's right.
sometimes they're black, and we have no consciousness of the um, uh, immigrant populations of European descent that
Mm-hmm.
right that are it just is not even considered, not even asked. But
Indeed,
absolutely,
encouraged right now, right? Is what only so-called refugees, white refugees from South Africa, are given some kind of priority status.
right.
Apparently, even
And
if you
Ukrainian
are white folks from Spanish-speaking countries, you may not be getting preferential status right now.
in that way, and of course the Ukrainian um,
Mm-hmm.
Ukrainian refugees who
Mm-hmm.
were, how the line cut, the cutting in the line to
Yeah.
get through processing
Yeah.
and filing proceedings and whatnot.
Well, that was a
Um,
really interesting thing, right? Because for a minute there, when the regime, 2.0 got started, the Ukrainians were losing status too, right? But whatever kind of resentment or pettiness because
yeah,
because of Biden, opening that door. So, but I wouldn't expect
yeah,
that, and I don't think that stayed that way for very long because of where they're coming from and what they're wanting to encourage this regime in terms of an ethnic cleansing, and then who's going to replace those people.
and yeah. So like the other piece is that the anti-blackness, the criminalization is standard across administrations,
Yeah.
whether it's a quote unquote liberal Democratic or conservative Republican or any of these things. The treatment of Black immigrants is standard, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, the speaking to that question of invisibility of the Black immigrant, and certainly the invisibility of the abuse of Black immigrants, disproportionate abuse, heightened abuse of Black immigrants. There has been a lot of um, uh, attempts to advocate on the part of Baji policy advocates um, for appropriate data collection, right? And there was a lot of arguing with the Biden administration about collect the data so that we can really understand and process, right,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening with Black immigrants. And
Mm-hmm.
this is invisibility by failure to research, by failure to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge count,
Mm-hmm.
so that's yeah,
And
this
there's
this
an
is the thing.
invisibility in the resistance, right? I mean, in the discourses that are opposing these, this overreach by the federal government, this invasion of the cities. But again, even in the coverage of how people are resisting, and the coverage of who's being rounded up, right?
Mm-hmm,
Those Black immigrants become
mm-hmm,
invisible, right? So
mm-hmm,
that there's again we end up with this false notion that all the immigrants that are being rounded up are primarily immigrants coming from various Latin American countries, and maybe some Black folks
mm-hmm.
from those Latin American countries, right? But even
Countries.
and again, that's just it. That's in the mainstream discourse of it, primarily, right? So that again, in the public imagination, you're not
Mm-hmm,
thinking about the Black people who are being stopped on the street and asked for their papers, right? And it gets lost in some of these U.S. citizens that are being um, detained are multi-generational, right, African American folks, folks with
Mhm.
ancestors from the traditional Confederacy and the Eastern Seaboard, all that, right? So just another form, even if that is, I think, is a kind of unintentional, right? Um, it falls
Mhm.
into it, right? The different ways in which the anti-Blackness ends up manifesting. But really,
Mhm.
that's something that can be where an intervention, right? And those activists can be uh, made cognizant of, hey, there's a gap right here in your public discourse about this, right? And, but these other folks, right,
Mhm.
that are ginning up, I mean, some of the oldest, types of tropes that, again, you pointed out, right, the anti-Blackness has been a feature of, the many and multiple administrations, right? And I would say there hasn't been a liberal Democratic administration
Mm.
since Carter, maybe.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
maybe some people might say Johnson, but it's Carter, because the
Okay.
Clintons and
Mm.
Clintons,
Right.
Clinton, Obama, and Biden, right? Neoliberal.
Mhm.
And we saw, and you already referenced Biden's failures vis-a-vis immigration and human rights, particularly around Black folks. And folks will always have that image of the Border Patrol agents on horseback, right? Running down Haitian migrants. But
Absolutely.
all of that, right? All of that part and parcel of the baked in, right? People don't want to admit it, but the baked in anti-Blackness of U.S. culture, right? And U.S. political culture, and U.S. popular culture. And for how long, right, has the popular culture, the various sectors of society, right, the popular culture, the talking heads, political discourse, the so-called areas of research coming out of universities, doubling down on that criminalizing, discourse, criminalizing of Black people in the United States, um, pathologizing of our communities.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and for for a very long time, that's been the discourse. And so, we reach a point again in this Trump regime where after 10 years of this, um, all the things that we always expected a lot of white folks were saying among themselves or behind closed doors, they are again just saying openly, right? And even, calling for different kinds of, restrictions on things, right? Celebrating individuals who are, calling for, at least characterizing the Civil Rights Act and I suppose the Voting Rights Act also as
Mhm.
great mistakes, um,
Mhm.
and along with calls for repeals to the 19th Amendment, right? So there's all this doubling down, and that's another thing we should be talking about too, in the future, misogyny on parade. Um,
Absolutely. In fact, I was, yeah,
and,
literally
and
thinking
we know
about
these
that
things
earlier.
come together too,
Yeah.
right? And we know these things come together.
Right.
The
Right.
But yeah, I mean, just so I'm thinking, for example, right, some years back, um, I don't know how many years ago, but the two films that came out in the same year and both were award winning, Precious and The Blind Side.
Mm.
And I recall at that time, the writer Ishmael Reed, right, writing about how toxic a film like Precious was, right? And there was, and there was a lot of discussion around that. But that again,
Mhm.
that film, and then the celebration of that film, you, you know, it instills in people, right, that these are somehow accurate representations of Black people writ large, right? And you got the one film that just is, there's just Black parental pathology everywhere, right, all over this, and just, um,
Right. Right.
ultimately, like there's no hope for these people, right, and for this young woman and her children going forward. And on the other side, right, the Black
Mm.
child, right, the Black man child whose again family is toxic, unable to raise him, saved by the middle class, upper middle class, affluent white family, right, and on his path to the NFL, right, and both of these attacks on Black family, Black parenthood, Black people, are award winning that year. Um, and that's part of setting the environment for pogroms. I mean, simply put, right? That kind of extrajudicial killing has primarily been, the purview of the state, primarily, not exclusively. But we can't be surprised by increased incidents with this kind of discourse uh, being spoken openly, right, and called for in many ways.
And it's actually specifically that I've been anticipating for a number of years, somewhere in that twilight space of intuition and instinct, and just kind of that awareness that we can literally expect to see at some point or another white mob violence.
Mm-hmm.
And um, if they talk about all the dog whistling, that goes on, and there's the dog whistling, and then there's the setting up of the, what is it, the eliminating, right, this process of eliminating the legal structures that were
Mm-hmm.
put in place to uh, what is the word, stave the violence,
Mm-hmm.
to stave
Mm-hmm.
that disunwanted
Mm-hmm.
violence, um, and those are, those legal openings are, if there's dog whistles, this is the doggy door,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's passage, right? There's free passage, which brings me to this little article that I stumbled on in Truth Out. And the name of the article, where is my article? I pasted it in here earlier. Here we are. Is it showing up? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Swastikas and nooses are no longer hate symbols under the new Coast Guard
That's right.
rules. And it's a quick read. It was published today by Chris Walker in
Mm-hmm.
in Truth Out Online, and in Truth Out's online, uh, on Truth Out's website.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially, they've removed the language hate symbol, right? They're no longer using that language, so that if swastikas and nooses, et cetera, appear, the new language is, or the language to be used is potentially divisive, right?
Mm-hmm.
How, the question of how to respond to potentially divisive or hate symbols is now this question of how to respond to potentially divisive
Mm-hmm.
symbols, etc. Right? That might turn up, and the the what has changed, right, is, whereas first of all, what is isn't a hate symbol wasn't like a question of big dispute, but any commanding officers could order to have, the symbol removed immediately without, any of these things. There was not a lot of, there weren't a lot of bureaucratic hurdles for someone to bring, to bring the charge or to register the complaint, and so there was a mechanism in place that dissuaded, that kind of display, right? And so now, of course, they're not hate symbols. They're potentially divisive, and officers can no longer just, order these things to be removed. It has to go through a process. I mean, we get it. We know how this works. We know it's the same maneuvers, has to go through a process. There's a limited amount of time within which someone can register a complaint, having, seen such a display. And what was explained about this problem of having something like 45 days to register a complaint, which to the layperson, to the civilian sounds like a, substantial amount of time, is that, people go on whatever duties, start deployments or whatnot for months at a time, months at a time. And so it makes it virtually impossible to register a complaint, and or it puts the person in the position of registering a complaint that has no opportunity to be reviewed and pursued. And so you're in the environment with the racist aggressor, so we get it, for for an indeterminate period of time. So opening up the doggy door, trying to say, yeah, go ahead, and pretty soon someone is going to try it. Going to try their
Sure. That's already and that's an ongoing issue in the military, right? The white supremacist underground in the U.S. military forces has already been there, right? This is just
when I say someone's going to try it, if I may, when I say someone's going to try it, I wasn't thinking about the military confines. I was thinking about the general society, which is a statement that says there's no anti-Black attack and violence. We remain understood the the object of white domestic terrorism, that's ongoing. But in terms
exactly.
of
And I wasn't challenging your point in any way, if that's what you thought. I was saying,
no, I was
there's a tradition of that in the military already, and this is that there was some recognition of hate speech, right? Was those mitigating efforts, right? But that's just it, right? All the mitigating efforts are done away with, right? And pretty much throughout all of society, right? All the various areas of society.
Exactly.
Nick Fuentes was correct in all of his crassness when he was saying after the election, your body, my choice, right? It was a very succinct expression that all the restraints are now gone, are about to be dismantled. So it's certainly in keeping, right? In some ways, that it's the logical next step, right? That swastikas and nooses would no longer be hate symbols, and now this Byzantine process of filing a complaint has been put in place when you consider the Crusader Secretary of Defense, the white supremacist wearing tattoos, Secretary of Defense, and all of the stuff that they are that he has been preaching, and appeals to that Trump base, right? That hardcore 30%, doesn't matter what he does. Um, these are the defenders of whiteness, Trump base.
Mm-hmm.
Whether and some
Mm-hmm.
of whom are now, as we're saying, are able to say it that way, right? Defender, that we need to
Mm-hmm.
defend the white race, and um, all of the misinformation about so-called white genocides. And if there is any such thing, they're responsible for it themselves, right? So, and are the
Right.
perpetrators of it themselves, if there is such a thing,
Against
as
lesser whites.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Massive
It
lesser
is
white.
fascinating, right? Um, no longer hate symbols. So, what cultural symbols? What is the argument that someone's going to make? You know, the noose in particular. I'm thinking, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's wild, but that's the point. They are wilding.
Just,
The militant white
yes.
supremacists, stuff you and I talked about in the lead up to the election, right? That um,
Mm-hmm.
the prospect of militant white nationalists, white supremacists, Christian nationalists having the apparatus of the state, right? All of the coercive apparatus of the state. Um, we see what the military is doing, right? The Caribbean is declared a zone of peace that the United States is, ignoring, and who's being, it's people of color again, right? It's going to be black and brown people that are being killed in these boats. Um, extrajudicial killings, if there is any kernel of truth that somebody might be running drugs. It's still a war crime, right? That isn't even a capital offense, if you are, right? And um uh, 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 what legal methods and all this stuff, right? So, but it doesn't matter, because those are lives that can be snuffed out, like the lives of Black people here, other non-white people here, can be stuffed out, or just can be deported, right? Can be disappeared, um, and symbolically disappeared too, because that's the thing, right? That all of these sectors coming together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that both the reemergence of some of the most insulting, um, sort of stereotypes, calumny, placed on Black people. This reemergence of the so-called welfare queen. This bull crap about uh, don't be wasting money on your nails. You can't get your nails done with Snap, by the way.
You can't. No.
You know, and
No.
and even
Yeah.
that thought, right? That poor people don't
Yeah.
deserve nice things, don't deserve to do
Exactly.
things, or to look nice, or
Precisely.
that, that is so deeply,
Precisely.
and yeah, that right there, right? Just that's so
All these
deeply in.
notions of what's a privilege, the all
Mhm.
the every bit of really human expression when you get right down to it, artistic expression. You're poor, you can't afford to participate in the culture arts
Right,
world.
right,
You're poor, you can't afford the vanity of plastic surgery or whatever. And humans are vain people, whatever the standard of beauty is, people are trying to
that's right.
into in whatever culture, that's what people do,
Hmm.
you know and etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
expression. Be able choice with food, choice in what you want to eat, what you don't want to eat, all these kinds of things. And it's just really
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
it's a culturally rooted attitude, and
Yes, it is.
I think it has challenged on that level as well, and questioned
Mm-hmm.
just in
And
that
questions,
way that
yes.
you just
And
is it that yes, go ahead. The
well,
whole
no,
the
just
notion of
I'm just co-signing with you, right? That yeah, that should always be, don't let people get away with acting like just because people are poor, they don't deserve, that they don't work.
yes,
Again, this whole thing that folks aren't working for things, trying to make ends meet, all the things, all
yeah,
the things that everybody else is trying to do. And that even you, right, whoever the person who may be complaining about, how dare you spend money on nails, what are you spending money on that you can't
it's,
afford, that and that's why you got it on credit, right?
you know
That you are willing to go into debt for, right? And what was the story?
absolutely.
Is it Nana who talked about, I don't give money to folks that because they're going to use it for drugs? Well, that's what I was going to use it
That
for,
was me.
probably too. But
Right,
like,
no,
you were going
yeah,
to go buy a 6-pack,
it's me
so
repeating
you
that
know,
story, having heard it somewhere and laughed out loud. Yeah.
but anyway, just that, right? That this notion that just that the poor, the black and poor, the indigenous and poor don't
Yeah.
deserve, right? For and
The
indeed, their poverty is somehow uh, um,
yes,
a evidence
it's
of their lack
yeah,
of worthiness, right? Without again any
worthiness
without any notion
in
of a
way.
systemic analysis. But of course, we are not encouraged to look at the system, look at the structures. Everything's individualized in this society, right? If
In
you're
the
poor, it's
same
your
way
fault.
that no
In the same way,
in the same way that prosperity is taken to be the symbol of good character. It's supposed to be evidence of
mm-hmm,
somehow good character and moral achievement
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
favor of the God.
Yep.
And poverty is evidence of low morality, and so that template being in place, folks fill in the gap with whatever the what
Mm-hmm,
in whatever way to
mm-hmm.
needs be to kind of keep that fundamental notion supported, because
Right.
it's absolutely ridiculous these in the context of intergenerational wealth. I mean, the whole concept of a freeloader, the whole concept of in the concept of intergenerational wealth, what do you have but a but droves and droves of people that are what drifting
Right.
through society, uh, sailing through society on the wave of on we know grafted wealth,
Mm-hmm.
and so these all of these kinds of imaginary moral boundaries around accumulation of wealth, these imaginary moral boundaries that I think it bears being exposed when it comes up in any kind of conversation, and it will, because it is the conversation. It's the conversation. If you talk about, I remember being in a situation, um, a group, enlightened group of yoga practitioners getting their licensing and all of that. And one of the folks who were in the training was talking about their sibling who had been homeless for years. And their conclusion was, well, they like that. That's how they want to live. And and there was all these, this is their choice. This is how they want to live. This is this kind of thing. And just the usual, really, of that hope, in this very intimate, personal interaction. You know what I'm saying? This
Mm-hmm.
is your
Mm-hmm.
sibling. This is your person, you grew up with this person, whatnot. But anyway, the tropes survive and are applied and applied and reapplied. So anyway, it has to be challenged. It really has to be challenged. What does any human being not deserve? And yes, these broader systemic issues, what makes for these questions of what makes for um, safe society, healthy society, thriving society, and the role that making sure that everyone is materially secure plays in those factors, in those elements.
So that
Full stop.
that anti-poor, right? The anti, the hate for the poor in this country is absolutely tied to the hatred for Black people, as it is to
Mm-hmm.
the hatred for the indigenous folks, including those indigenous folks who are often identified as Mexican, and or Chicanics.
Mm-hmm.
The And among all those communities, right? The again, it is a multifaceted um, attack, a multifaceted disappearing, right? So we we we've been hearing the reports. We know that they are actively this regime, right? The Trump regime is actively purging the museums, right, to tell a particular type of story now about the United States. That universities have been under pressure to do the same, having funding threatened and all that, to create a
Mm-hmm.
curriculum more in line with what the very patriotic, very Christian nationalist kind of curriculum of a Hillsdale College, right? That as a
Mm-hmm.
model. The and so very much trying to silence the work of the various ethnic studies, right, um, and those discourses. So we know that, right? We know that, just kind of structurally, um, the attack on the federal government is an attack on Black employment. As the regime comes in promising, Black jobs, which again, as I always thought, they expected us to get into the fields as they're, depopulating the fields, right? Those were the Black jobs he was talking about. At the same time, they're talking about anti-DEI. I mean, what? So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that though, right? That attack on Black employability in particular areas. The and again, the kind of discursive and cultural attack that comes from various aspects, like a lot of these uh, uh, podcasters, right? These well-platformed individuals like the Turning Point USA folks, and of course, we know that this was Charlie Kirk's shtick, right? The anti-blackness is so thick. The Again, I've mentioned them before. There are several of these Christian nationalist pastors who are actively, um, identifying Black people as the problem or a problem, and again, those Christian nationalists, evangelical fundamentalists who identify the Black church as problematic, where it can, not even progressive, right, but it just can be identified as a liberal church, right? The And doing so in ways. So let me take the example of this individual, Joel Webbin, right? Some kind of pastor, and not an old man, right? Maybe he's in his 40s, maybe he's in his 30s. I don't know. But his comments maybe a month ago or whatever on reparations, for example, Why we're always in their
Mhm.
mouth, I don't, why are you even talking about us? Ain't nobody on this set black, right? Why is it? But anyway, we know, right, that we also live rent free in those
Rent
minds,
free.
right? The
Absolutely.
so the conversation or the little clip of the conversation is why are black people asking for reparations, right? Your reparations is that you get to live in the United States, and you should be grateful that you're here in the United States, because otherwise you would be living in some hut in Africa, right? But again, it's rooted in that fundamental, all the fundamental mythologies and distortions of Africa, African society, the African past, the African present, right? Um, and just the willful ignorance, right? Because this is not even hard to discover, right? Plenty of research has happened over the last 200 years for people to know something about Africa, right? Nothing about the so-called dark continent that doesn't even fit anymore, right? And
Mm.
and even more to be discovered. But they're just not that they care to find that out,
Mhm.
or even investigate their own holy book thoroughly, right? And doesn't matter, right? Because the ideology is white supremacy, and fundamental to white
Mhm.
supremacy is a basic anti-blackness, right? And
Mhm. Mhm.
broadly speaking,
Mhm.
the way Malcolm speaks in that speech, the Black Revolution, and when I say black, I mean the non-white world that is struggling for liberation, right? And very broadly like that is anti-black, and very specifically anti-African, anti, fully identified black people. Um, and I've been very effective over this last 40 years, I think, 40 plus years, in roping black people and other people of color into that
Mhm.
anti-black, right? And so that we become, many of us, a minority, but a very vocal minority, become very
Mhm.
vocal proponents, right, of the
Mhm.
anti-black. Forget
Mhm.
that black stuff. It's all our fault,
Mhm.
etc. As
Mhm.
we know, right?
The
And
problem
uh,
of black culture. Mhm.
the problem is in our culture,
Mhm.
completely ignorant of the fact that if it wasn't for our culture, and more than our plastic culture, right, but those fundamental values that remained with us, the fundamental communalism of Africa and the African worldview, and the notion of a larger, visible and invisible African community and connection, etc. All the various things that maintained us, um, has
Mhm.
maintained, and I say continues too, right? Um,
Mhm.
but I can't say that without acknowledging they've had some victories, right? And they have been very effective in pulling some of us away, and deploying them against us, and often very vocally and destructively. Um, and our own learned and internalized, anti-blackness that is just part of that colonizing, enslaving experience, right? Um, you know,
Mhm. Mhm.
I think I've spoke about this before with you or mentioned it to you before. The Stars mini, or I don't know what to call it, the Stars series, Spartacus, from a few years back,
Mhm.
and maybe it was the second season of Spartacus, when when the original actor became ill and needed to be
Mhm.
replaced. And they
Mhm.
did. I think the second season, if I'm remembering correctly, was a prequel to Spartacus,
Mhm.
and it
Okay.
introduces some of the characters we already know. We get their backstory, but one of them, and I found it fascinating, and actually I think it plays out through the entire Spartacus series.
Mhm.
But it was, for me, very acute in that second season. And I don't remember. Spartacus. The first season was what? Spartacus, Blood and Sand. Maybe the second season was Spartacus, Gods of the Arena. That might have been it, something like that. But it broke down. I mean, it does. I thought this really kind of meticulous little look at how the slave owner gets the enslaved to identify his interest or her interest with the slave owner, right? How where you get to that, how you get to that we sick boss mind, right? World. And I thought, wow, I mean, to me, it was just brilliant. Now here the slaves are gladiators, right? Whatever, right? Slaves and slaves who are offering their body up in very brutal ways, right? For this other person to be enriched and for them to somehow live in the glory, right, of that, right? But it's fascinating. It was fascinating to me. I thought that was just really, really very effectively handled, as it shows you a character that you meet in the first season, who's the Doctori, right, the leader of the teacher of the gladiators, who's also a slave, right, but elevated, right. And so you get his backstory when he first becomes a gladiator, when he is first brought into the ludus and this household, and how the owner. I'm trying brainwashes. I was looking for another word, right? But step by step, right, convinces him of the glory that he will bring to them in his position as a celebrated slave, right? So it's fascinating, but it's again it revealed to me, or I thought it captured, right, that process through which we, the enslaved, we, the colonized, accept the worldview, right, of our colonizers and our enslavers, and thereby accept sort of the, how should I say, kind of the appropriateness of our subjugation. And even if it's, well, that might not be me, but that is the rest of them. I'm different, right?
All of that, right. The kind of
and I see that one of our viewers, Angela Davis, 3919, is commenting with pedagogy of the oppressed.
Okay,
and
great.
Maybe making that connection.
Great.
But yeah, always a fan of pedagogy of the oppressed.
That what was generated as the aspirational culture, the culture of aspiration. Or should I say, this is an ethos of aspiration. That it is not appropriate to challenge the hierarchy and to, equate actually and finally with the, hegemon or the oppressor, but to to participate in the structure through this kind of aspirational, attitude. Of course, we'll never be them, but then we have this whole proximity, the whole proximity game, which, we're talking about the current focus, or this focus on the South Asian, the Indian, for all the reasons that we, understand, as they've been so, or certain of them visible, in their participation with this neo-ethno-statism, not everybody knows that kind of doctrinarianism that includes, everybody knows that kind of root, but it certainly is a popular discourse, and my personal evidence of that was sixth grade. You know, sixth
What was
grade
what?
when
Sixth grade?
in, in sixth grade when, well, a group of my schoolmates, and I had no idea what a coon was actually, right? And they invited me to become, Tasha, do you want to become, join our group? We're going to be the Coon brothers and you could be a Coon sister. I was like, okay, because I had no idea. And I went home and told my mom, and she laughed out loud and said, honey, this is what that is, you know? And so I went the next day. I literally laughed out loud, as did her client. You know, we all kind of had a good laugh. And I went back to school the next day and took them to task, right? And so one of the interactions was with this Indian kid that had come, you know, to school that year, had joined school that year in sixth grade. And his part of his, you know, explanation as to why he could participate in this and join this and whatnot was that he's, you know, actually white. You know, he's actually Aryan. He told me this in sixth grade. This was 1970, whatever. Never mind
Mm-hmm.
the year, age. You know how pronounced a conversation, you know, this was in his, at least his household, likely the
Mm-hmm.
community. And that, you know, and that's, you know, something to talk about, you know, on its own, the whole Indo-European language family
Yeah.
piece and how it works into the, you know, all of
Yeah.
that. But yeah, that proximity. So, you know,
Right.
and the
And a
at the same
proximity that's
time,
an imagination of European academics, right?
absolutely, because it's in the same space where the notion of the dark-skinned Caucasian
Mm-hmm.
and the
Right.
Mediterranean type
Exactly.
is created to
Right.
explain Kemet, you know, to explain, you know,
Even if they're
and
black, they're white.
even if they're black or white. So I mean, because we know that, you know, this hierarchy is, you know, written on tablets, and you know,
Yes.
so it's all it's quite interesting that the way the internalization of the culture and the um what the what is the word, the pervasiveness
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
the tropes, the pervasiveness of the tropes,
Exactly.
and the identification down to another lived experience with the Indian community, um, where you know, mom and I used to eat Indian food, right? Before it was hip, right? So we were all over the Indian restaurants. There was one, and you've heard me tell the story. Um, One in particular we used to go to, it was on Wilshire, and we used to go to this Indian restaurant. And so at a certain point, a young sister from Sri Lanka was working for the owner of the restaurant, who was Punjabi, right? And so he was concerned. He wanted to help her, but he was concerned that he couldn't, you know, for various reasons, bring her home to his family. Could we take her in? Could we, you know, which we did for a minute. And anyway, I remember this young woman, and mom was a hairdresser. On this particular day, we're in the restaurant, and my hair was straightened right on this particular day. And she was, you know, so excited about my straightened hair, and tell the story of how when she was born, you know, her skin was light and her hair was long and straight. How many times have we heard ourselves tell this story? I don't know. When I had good hair up until such and
Yeah.
such a time. When I was born, I was late. I mean, the very articulate has always fascinated me. And the other thing that she did with this straightened hair was come up behind me and lift up the back of my hair because we think the kitchen, is so
Kitchen
unique.
tells the truth.
So the kitchen tells the truth, and we think that it's
Mm-hmm.
such a unique observation. The
Mm-hmm.
kinky hair around the neck, right? She sure
Mm-hmm.
did from Sri Lanka come up and lift the back of my hair to see what. So it is really it's fascinating, it's liberating, it's mind expanding to understand how pervasive these false, these
Yeah.
tropes are,
Yeah.
and the way they work, and
Yeah.
all of this aspiration to whiteness across cultures,
Yeah.
across groups. If you're yellow, if you're light red, it's not white enough. Everybody's bleaching their damn skin. I dare say, except African Americans. I don't know that we do that so
Might
much
be the
anymore. I
only
think our
group that isn't. Yeah, I think that might be true
might
broadly,
have been
right?
Ambi. I think
The
Ambi in the 70s was, I think, our last adventure with some kind
mhm,
of skin lightening kind of a thing. So,
mhm.
but everywhere else it's what a thing it is, right? Anyway.
Well, and all of it speaks to the fundamental irrationality of the society, right? And these tropes, right? And a really society built on particular kinds of mythology, and ultimately very deadly mythology. But yeah,
Yes.
it speaks to that fundamental irrationality of the society, and irrationality, the irrational, the emotional, and I don't mean like I like to call the extra rational, but the irrational, um, that appeal to emotions and the strong negative emotion. Um, has been their stock and trade, has been the stock and trade, right, of
Yes.
white supremacist culture, right? And there this apparently this question gets asked periodically. Do white people have a culture? Which I think is ridiculous. Of course, people wonder if black people have a culture, but all people have a. I mean,
Right.
it's just this is
Right.
people have culture, y'all. If you
Right.
speak a language, you got to just
We have a
but
culture.
it's a
Right.
fascinating question to me, though. Do white people have? But yes, they do, and
Mhm.
all rooted in their home cultures. But beyond that, the culture of white supremacy, right? The meaningfulness of white supremacy is it needs these mythologies. It needs the mythology of the racial hierarchy, and it needs the
Yeah.
mythologies of a mythic Aryan race sweeping down from the north, and it is fed right by and I accuse them of nothing specifically, but it is reflective, I think, and some of the imaginative work that produces an imagined prehistory of the world in what is the place called Hyboria, the where the
Mm.
Conan stories, Conan the Barbarian stories take place,
Mhm.
but does
Mhm.
imagine right this world of the North, right, and those become even those that are
Mm.
purely fictional, right? But are fictional in a way that feeds that notion, right, of a warlike, vigorous,
Yes.
inventive northern
Yeah.
people, right, who sweep down
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
and destroy or overtake the decadent and feminized civilizations of the South, and that
Yes.
feminizing is part of that, right, that these decadent and that language, right, reading some history books from like the turn of the 20th century, and routinely describe, well, this the Orientalism, right, routinely describe um, Asian societies, Western Asian, East Asian, South Asian, African societies as decadent, um,
Mhm.
feminized in some kind of
Mhm.
way. or
Mm,
childlike, right? But the
mhm,
the the one
mhm,
thing they aren't is so-called manly, right?
mhm,
The,
mhm,
and so that
mhm.
becomes part of the content of anti-Black belief, systems of belief, and ties in, quite usefully with the fundamental misogyny.
Absolutely. It's all of a piece, right?
It's
It all
all of a
goes
piece.
together. It's all of a
Yes.
piece. And so, in they're not wrong that what the thought that has been generated around, and all of the intellectual work and imaginative work, and that has been done to untie these knots of racist confusion and racist what um I don't have the language, but untying these knots of concept, right? Okay, this we know it's incorrect. How do we go about understanding how and why it's incorrect, right? And over decades, thinking and collecting of information and histories, and come to this vital moment from all these sectors, right? Of oppressed persons within this structure. And yeah, they're right. This shit is getting uprooted. It's getting dismantled. It's getting seen through.
Right.
It's the path
Right.
of liberation out
Hmm.
of this shit is clearly seen. And you are right. It is over for that
That's right.
for that narrative. It's been exposed. It's a lie. So yeah,
Yeah.
your best bet is to try to criminalize, exile, kill off, discredit or whatnot one generation, and get to the next generation with this narrative, reimplant this narrative as soon as you can. That's the plan, Stan. But you know,
Right.
other
Yeah.
people have other plans, and that's
Right.
you know that's got yes, just that, just that. And actually, other human beings are full and fully functioning human beings with all kinds of capacity. So even the way that it is imagined that this plan will be successful and will carry forth, and this it is part of the ego of that thing, the hubris of that thing.
Mhm. Well, as the folks in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the African People's Solidarity Committee, right? White folks working in solidarity. Um, it can attest, right? You can give all that up and just rejoin humanity, right? And really, that's what remains to be seen. That y'all need to recognize that you aren't going to disappear from the earth, right? It's we're all it is not an existential crisis for you. You're making it an existential crisis for all of us, right? Because this is not an existential crisis for you, but you think it
No.
is. And when you come,
Mm-hmm.
you got to come around to the realization, like so many other so-called white people have, that
Mm-hmm.
we're going to
Right.
be okay. We're going to be okay. We
Right.
can just be human
Because
like everybody else. And there is
because
enough
white
for everybody else.
everybody, there's
And
enough
everybody is
of every
working. Everybody works. And all
absolutely.
so we can leave these mythologies behind that only served a few people anyway, ultimately, and aren't serving us,
Mhm.
and can no longer serve in the same way, right? Because, like you said, the gig is up, right? People know that this is not the only
Mhm.
story, the only path, and the the earth
Mm-hmm.
seeks equilibrium, right? And a social equilibrium is coming. This last hurrah, and we know it's also internationalized, but it's a last hurrah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's unsustainable. Just a question of
Mm-hmm.
how destructive is it going to be. I agree with you. People need to organize. People begin to need to begin organizing in their communities, continue organizing in their communities to be prepared for the kind of mob violence, non-state, officially anyway, violence that can emerge, that we already know the current regime, right, is willing to deploy,
Support.
and
Absolutely.
and knows how to signal,
Yes.
and has already been
Yes.
active. Um, so
Yes.
yeah, folks need to prepare for that in all communities. And if you are some, in communities that are gentrifying, y'all are gonna have to decide which side are you on, and how do we
Yeah.
organize to for the safety of this community, the people in the community. Um, I maybe again, other than the police, we haven't seen the pogroms that Black people, and I know folks aren't used to using that language with Black people,
Absolutely.
but,
Right.
but we know that's what they were, and just what 100 years ago. I mean,
Yes.
not that long ago,
Yes.
and maybe
Yes.
less than 100 years. So
Yes.
we should be preparing for that, just as folks are organized as they properly should. Have been getting better and better organized and learning from each other from city to city about how to deal with ICE, how to deal with the Border Patrol, how to deal with the National
Yes.
Guard when they are being deployed. We see that resistance is growing, and this is part of that needs to be folded in. What are we going to do when, again, popular podcasters on the right, and they don't need to be popular with everybody, they're popular with their base, are calling for Black neighborhoods to be bulldozed, right? Are calling for Black neighborhoods, regardless of how long your family has lived in this country, and before it was even a country, lived in this country, to be removed somehow, dealt with, whatever they are thinking about a final solution. These pastors that are re-justifying the enslavement of people, and all the various things, these folks creating these fake AI videos about Black women, who aren't women at all. They are computer generated imagery, right? But stereotypically complaining about not getting their SNAP or whatever. All of these things to gin up that mob violence and to justify when the state acts, right? And so because they don't want to see a repeat of the summer of 2020,
Mm-hmm.
unless they're the ones doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
we need to be
Mm-hmm.
organizing around that and recognize that the anti-Blackness that has always been there, the anti-Blackness that has been officially denied, particularly by the Republican Party and conservatives and reactionaries, particularly by them, can no longer be denied, right? As they are full-chested, saying, yes, we are open white supremacists, and we feel completely justified. And they're not even trying now to contain
Yeah.
that. As we
Yeah.
all, again, what was it? Um, Swastikas and nooses are no longer hate symbols. Yeah, the word has been, the word has come down, right? All constraints are off. Do your worst. So we really do need to um, seriously prepare for their worst.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and as we were talking about the, the last stand and the, struggling to revive and prop up this ailing and disintegrating narrative. It's also, as when we did the conversations about the war on modernity, right? that
Mhm.
becomes very stark choice. You get with uh, uh, the highly destructive myth,
Mhm.
seeing and in saying myth, something that is literally unreal. We understand it to be unreal. If there was ever, when there was a point in time when it appeared to be real, all of these things have been disproven, so there's also this choice of on which side are you on. Are we going with? I've heard it said, and I really love this statement, with modernity. Are you going to go with this kind of scientifically based approach, to choice making for human
Yeah.
society,
Yeah.
to indicate next steps, next questions, next ways of seeing things, because these, and proceeding accordingly, right? And it's the choice of being extractive rather than integrative with, sustainable and integrative with our relations. It's the practice of, it's the racism, it's the, all of these things. It's just an appropriate distribution. It's getting rid of all of these bullshit and you know uh inaccurate and untrue and all these kinds of,
Yeah.
all of the myths that prop up unequal distribution, and erecting in that, standing up in that, you know,
Yeah.
and staying there, So yeah, we need, yes, we need to get ready, we need to understand and explain that to whoever will listen,
Mhm.
who will listen.
Mhm.
At
Yeah.
least there's that much preparation, even if it's not something that wants to be received. There's at least that much more psychological preparation. At least someone has
Mhm.
told me so, told me
Mhm.
there'd be days like this. Because for many of us, we still can't imagine that these folk are, folks aren't talking about, yeah, they're trying to Jim Crow. They're trying to,
Right. Right.
they're
Yeah.
trying to
Exactly.
Crowism. That's
Yeah.
not the conversation where when it needs to be, So
So
yes,
let me
indeed.
be a little bit conspiracy theory, but maybe not that much. Because I'm looking at these recent these recent investigations. I may be arrest, but at least investigations into gambling in sports, right? And whether players and or coaches are, gambling. And I just find it, very interesting that everyone that has been publicly um, arrested or investigated, they're all black, right?
Mhm.
What black players in the NBA, a black coach in the NBA, two black pitchers who are also from Latin America, maybe the Dominican, I'm not sure. Maybe Puerto Rico. They're the only ones that have
Mhm.
been publicly arrested and or investigated now. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
whether or not they did it, whatever, this was predicted as soon as a few years ago when gambling was like made okay or whatever, and people predicted that this was going to happen. That was kind of easy. But I'm
Uh-huh.
just noticing, okay, you know, this seems to fit into again their pattern, right? It's highly visible black people that can be embarrassed, and often athletes
Hmm.
the United States has this weird love, mostly hate relationship, primarily with black athletes, right?
Mhm.
I mean, love them, right, to perform well for their teams, but are always talking about, the again, this discourse of undeserving, right? That they don't deserve their great contracts. Never any discussion about who can afford to pay them that much and how much money are they making, right?
Yeah.
And all
Never.
that type
Right.
stuff. But it is one way for years that white men in particular have been able to talk bad, talk
Mhm.
down um,
Don't. Mhm.
insult,
disparagingly.
call them thugs and all the various things, Black people through these Black athletes whom they love until they make any kind of mistake on the court, on the field, or whatever. And there was a thing some years back where all these football players in Cincinnati, right, Black players on the Bengals were constantly getting interactions with the police. And all the sports talk was, well, why can't these young men get themselves together? Instead of, are you not recognizing the pattern here? They're getting stopped because they're Black, right? I mean, this is driving while Black, right? This driving a nice car while Black. All of that, but that's not the discourse, right? It's always the problem, the behavioral or personal issue of the athlete. So I'm just, because I read that as just another version of that anti-Blackness from a state source, right? Being exercised. That these are the targets that we can go after, publicly humiliate. Demonstrate again, try to find a way to demonstrate their unworthiness, regardless of whether or not they are guilty of what they're being charged of. They may or may not. I don't know. It has to go through the due process, right? But the work that it does symbolically for this openly white nationalist regime.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I know we've been at it for almost an hour and a half. So
yeah.
We can go ahead and close up. You got any final thoughts you want to share?
Final thoughts. People get ready. People get ready. Keep standing up, feeling upful, feeling strong. Learn more. Break through whatever barriers in your understanding there are, and do what you know. Go in the direction of what you know is right. Right, and fill in that information as you go. People connect up, and don't unlink arms. And let's do this thing. Don't unlink arms. Let's do this thing. And
Black people don't unlink arms.
Black people don't unlink arms. Members of the human family that are in resistance to these oppressions, link up arms and don't let go, and see it through. This resistance isn't about temporary relief. This isn't about Pepto-Bismol. We need to change our diet. You know what I'm saying? So keep pushing until keep pushing until you are in a just world, and don't accept reforms when they feel themselves to be overwhelmed and outmaneuvered, and retreat and sell out reforms, and piece out some reforms. Don't think you've arrived. You haven't arrived until the structure is promoting and perpetuating true justice for all, thriving for all, to come out of cliche, right? Thriving for all. So we have work ahead. Work ahead. This is just the wake up, the pounding at the door. Wake up, wake up, wake up. So let's do that. That's my last word.
Well, right on. So, we just want to say, folks, don't be anti-Black. Don't be racist. Be pro-Black.
Don't be that.
Listen to Black people. We have a lot to share, just as Africa does, right? There's a lot to share. And, don't be racist. Don't be fascist. Don't be colonialist.
Don't be that. Don't
be better than that, right? Be human, be humane, be humanly humane, and humanely human, and earthical, right? And let us share this planet.
Yes.
As as our indigenous relatives say, with all our relations. So I'll finish. Well, actually, we try to remember to do all the things, and thank you, those of you who've been, who have joined us. Really appreciate you, Angela Davis, 3919, and Life is Complex TV, and anyone else who joined us. Thank you. And anyone who's going to be watching this later, we really appreciate you too watching it. And we ask you all, if you have not done so, to please subscribe to the Joko Collective channel, as we're trying to, I haven't checked lately, we're trying to make our way all the way to 200 subscribers, right? 200. Help us get there, please. Please like the video so we can get, we can work the algorithm and all that stuff too. And share. Please share this. And we will be back next week continuing the discussion. Maybe we can pick up with the misogyny on parade next week, because it's a real thing. I mean, and that was easy. Anyway, all of it was easy for them to slip back into. Oh, really? But anyway, yes, we appreciate the comments to share, right? And by all means, thank you for commenting, and you can always comment on the video too. And we will see you next week, and I will finish the way I usually do, quoting Bob Marley. It's hard to go wrong quoting Bob Marley from the song Revolution, the Natty Dread album. Revelation reveals the truth. It takes a revolution to make a solution. Let's make a revolution, y'all, and we will see you next time.